Chapter 1 of Anne Veronica. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. Anne Veronica, A Modern Love Story by H.G. Wells. The art of ignoring is one of the accomplishments of every well-bred girl, so carefully instilled that at last she can even ignore her own thoughts and her own knowledge. Chapter the First. Anne Veronica talks to her father. Part 1. One Wednesday afternoon in late September, Anne Veronica Stanley came down from London in a state of solemn excitement and quite resolved to have things out with her father that very evening. She had trembled on the verge of such a resolution before, but this time quite definitely she made it. A crisis had been reached, and she was almost glad it had been reached. She made up her mind in the train home that it should be a decisive crisis. It is for that reason that this novel begins with her there, and neither earlier nor later, for it is the history of this crisis and its consequences that this novel has to tell. She had a compartment to herself in the train from London to Morningside Park, and she sat with both her feet on the seat in an attitude that would certainly have distressed her mother to see, and horrified her grandmother beyond measure. She sat with her knees up to her chin and her hands clasped before them, and she was so lost in thought that she discovered with a start, from a lettered lamp, that she was at Morningside Park, and thought she was moving out of the station, whereas she was only moving in. "Lord!" she said. She jumped up at once, caught up a leather clutch containing notebooks, a fat textbook, and a chocolate and yellow-covered pamphlet, and leapt neatly from the carriage, only to discover that the train was slowing down, and that she had to traverse the full length of the platform past it again as the result of her precipitation. "Sold again," she remarked. "Idiot!" She raged inwardly while she walked along with that air of self-contained serenity that is proper to a young lady of nearly 22 under the eye of the world. She walked down the station approach, past the neat, obtrusive offices of the coal merchant and the house agent, and so to the wicket gate by the butcher's shop that led to the field path to her home. Outside the post office stood a no-hatted, blond young man in grey flannels, who was elaborately affixing a stamp to a letter. At the sight of her he became rigid, and a singularly bright shade of pink. She made herself serenely unaware of his existence, though it may be it was his presence that sent her by the field detour instead of by the direct path up the avenue. "Umph," he said, and regarded his letter doubtfully before consigning it to the pillar-box. "Here goes," he said. Then he hovered undecidedly for some seconds, with his hands in his pockets and his mouth puckered to a whistle, before he turned to go home by the avenue. Anne Veronica forgot him as soon as she was through the gate, and her face resumed its expression of stern preoccupation. "It's either now or never," she said to herself. Morningside Park was a suburb that had not altogether, as people say, come off. It consisted, like pre-Roman Gaul, of 3 parts. There was first the avenue, which ran in a consciously elegant curve from the railway station into an undeveloped wilderness of agriculture, with big, yellow brick villas on either side. And then there was the pavement, the little clump of shops about the post office, and under the railway arch was a congestion of workmen's dwellings. The road from Surbiton and Epsom ran under the arch, and, like a bright fungoid growth in the ditch, there was now appearing a sort of 4th estate of little red and white rough-cast villas, with meretricious gables and very brassy window-blinds. Behind the avenue was a little hill, and an iron-fenced path went over the crest of this to a stile under an elm tree, and forked there, with one branch going back into the avenue again. "It's either now or never," said Ann Veronica, again ascending this stile. "Much as I hate rows, I've either got to make a stand or give in altogether." She seated herself in a loose and easy attitude and surveyed the backs of the avenue houses. Then her eyes wandered to where the new red and white villas peeped among the trees. She seemed to be making some sort of inventory. "Ye gods!" she said at last, What a place! Stuffy isn't the word for it. I wonder what he takes me for." When presently she got down from the stile, a certain note of internal conflict, a touch of doubt, had gone from her warm-tinted face. She had now the clear and tranquil expression of one whose mind is made up. Her back had stiffened, and her hazel eyes looked steadfastly ahead. As she approached the corner of the avenue, the blond, no-hatted man in grey flannels appeared. There was a certain air of forced fatuity in his manner. He saluted awkwardly. "Hello, V," he said. "Hello, Teddy," she answered. He hung vaguely for a moment as she passed, but it was clear she was in no mood for Teddy's. He realized that he was committed to the path across the fields, an uninteresting walk at the best of times. "Oh, damn it," he remarked. "Damn it," with great bitterness as he faced it. Part 2. Ann Veronica Stanley was 21.5 years old. She had black hair, fine eyebrows, and a clear complexion. The forces that had modelled her features had loved and lingered at their work, and made them subtle and fine. She was slender, and sometimes she seemed tall, and walked and carried herself lightly and joyfully, as one who commonly and habitually feels well, and sometimes she stooped a little and was preoccupied. Her lips came together with an expression between contentment and the faintest shadow of a smile. Her manner was one of quiet reserve, and behind this mask she was wildly discontented and eager for freedom and life. She wanted to live. She was vehemently impatient. She did not clearly know for what. To do, to be, to experience. And experience was slow in coming. All the world about her seemed to be, how can one put it, in wrappers, like a house when people leave it in the summer. The blinds were all drawn, the sunlight kept out. One could not tell what colours these grey swathings hid. She wanted to know, and there was no intimation whatever that the blinds would ever go up, or the windows or doors be opened, or the chandeliers that seemed to promise such a blaze of fire unveiled and furnished and lit. Dim souls flitted about her, not only speaking, but it would seem even thinking in undertones. During her school days, especially her earlier school days, the world had been very explicit with her, telling her what to do, what not to do, giving her lessons to learn and games to play, and interests of the most suitable and various kinds. Presently she woke up to the fact that there was a considerable group of interests called being in love and getting married, with certain attractive and amusing subsidiary developments, such as flirtation and being interested in people of the opposite sex. She approached this field with her usual liveliness of apprehension, but here she met with a check. These interests her whirled promptly through the agency of schoolmistresses, older schoolmates, her aunt, and a number of other responsible and authoritative people, assured her she must on no account think about. Miss Moffatt, the history and moral instruction mistress, was particularly explicit upon this score, and they all agreed in indicating contempt and pity for girls whose minds ran on such matters, and who betrayed it in their conversation or dress or bearing. It was, in fact, a group of interests quite unlike any other group, peculiar and special, and one to be thoroughly ashamed of. Nevertheless, Ann Veronica found it a difficult matter not to think of these things. However, having a considerable amount of pride, she decided she would disavow these undesirable topics and keep her mind away from them just as far as she could. But it left her at the end of her school days with that rapt feeling I have described, and rather at loose ends. The world, she discovered, with these matters barred, had no particular place for her at all, nothing for her to do, except a functionless existence varied by calls, tennis, selected novels, walks, and dusting in her father's house. She thought study would be better. She was a clever girl, the best of her year in the high school, and she made a valiant fight for Somerville or Newnham, but her father had met and argued with a Somerville girl at a friend's dinner-table, and he thought that sort of thing unsexed a woman. He said simply that he wanted her to live at home. There was a certain amount of disputation, and meanwhile she went on at school. Their compromise